7 o'clock. Where are your children? No, it's 11 o'clock. Welcome everybody. Glad to have a good crowd again this month. And I think this is a most interesting, most fascinating story. But you got to listen to me and a couple of guys here first, okay? As always, we want to thank the City of Wilder for allowing us to use the facility here. And with that, Richard, can you read the minutes from last month?
On March 14th, we gathered here in Wilder for a presentation on Don Sanders. Attendance was about 85 people. Steve opened the meeting at 7:01. I read the minutes and gave an update on History Day. Glenn gave the treasurer's report with an ending balance of $12,314.74. Steve did read several reports on 261 members at the time, with more still coming in. Articles for the newsletter would be due by April 1st for the newsletter to go out at the end of April. St. Francis Cemetery was having a cleanup day on March 23rd. And then the Sons of the American Revolution was having a headstone marker dedication on April 20th at Stevens Farm in Alexandria. April 27th is the Northern Kentucky Restoration Day in Newport at the Intermediate School. May 11th is Alexandria Business District, little city block party on Main Street, Washington Street to Greenup. May 4th is History Day at the Erlanger branch of the library, Kenton County Library. The essay contest Shirlene announced had been sent to the judges at our last meeting. And in the veterans, we had received 98 more, with a total of 15,214 veterans in our file as of March. We had a member helping us put together some memories of Bellevue, a little project, and we could use some more volunteers for other areas of the county. The City of Wilder had agreed to be our host for a second Christmas tree site this winter. We have a couple volunteers willing to help on it, so our project will be bigger than ever, bigger, better than ever. And the June picnic will be at the Highland Park.
Cemetery.
Not yet. At that point, Steve turned the meeting over to Captain Sanders, but I also want to give History Day again, still May 4th out of the Erlanger Library.
We opened the month with $12,314.74. He had 8 renewals, $7.10 in donations, sold $194.80 in publications, $94.34 in photo reprints. Kroger donated $116.16 on their program, and we had 2 internet technology sponsors renew again this year for an income of $639.75. We bought folders and protectors for the office and meeting materials, paid the copier lease, and our net expenses were $384.25, and our ending balance $12,570.24.
Not too much to say tonight, except we are at 278 members in good standing. If you haven't paid your dues, you are not in good standing. Most of you here have all paid, but if you're visiting us and you're not a member, it's only $12 a year. Glenn has membership applications if anybody cares to join us. You get our newsletter 3 times a year, and you get notices of all of our meetings. And discounts on our publications. So the newsletter should be out and mailed by the end of this month. It'll be your May edition. It's going to have, it's a big newsletter. It's going to be packed full of stories. We have essay winner stories and lots of other contributions from other people. So look forward to that in your mailboxes at the end of the month. We've helped some people over the past month with some genealogy questions. A lot of people call us, as I've said before, to ask If we have pictures of the home they just bought, it's a historic home, they tell us. Well, we wish we didn't. We may have a picture of their home. If we have a big collection of photos in every city, but it would be, they would have to look through our whole collection because we don't have each home on a separate picture. You know, there might be a picture of a parade and the houses that were on that street, so you might find your house in one of our pictures. And unless it was someone notable, like our presentation tonight, who lived in the house, we might not have anything. Or unless it's on the historic register already, then we do have information.
Yes, we have essay winners. We have 3 junior and 3 senior. And I'm not going to tell you who they are. You have to read the newsletter or come to the September meeting, but they'll all be through the newsletter. What I will tell you is, over the 16 years that we've been doing this, we've had siblings enter the contest over the years. This is the first year that we've had a sibling, junior winner, and senior winner in the same household. That is amazing. So we're really excited about that, and they will be in the newsletter this time. So we're pleased with that. I'm assuming the Veterans Report, I've got a few things to talk about. Last month, we had 152 veterans added to our collection. 122 of them came from the Alexandria Cemetery Project. That is Marcia and Patty working on that. That is amazing to me. That made the total 15,366. Now, most of you know that Ken Reese is doing a book on Grand Slick, and we said, gee, we thought it would be nice if you listed the veterans in Grand Slick in your book. So we pulled all the sheets that we could find of veterans from Grand Slick who were either born there or buried there in Plum Creek, and I think we were close to 250 maybe. That's a lot of veterans just for one little area. Now, I have received today, as a matter of fact, a list of veterans from the Johns Hill Cemetery that I'll have to check against our records to see that I've got all of them. Which brings me to this request. If you live close to a cemetery and you would like to volunteer to research that cemetery and find all the veterans that are there, that would be awesome for us. You don't have to do St. Stephen's and the Evergreen, those are pretty big projects. But any of the other smaller cemeteries that we have around, that if you would have the time, and I know you're all retired and haven't got nothing to do, you could do that. So we would appreciate it if you would think about volunteering for a cemetery project for our veterans. And that's all I've got.
Had no idea you had such a sense of humor, Shirley.
You want to talk about the SAR?
Sure.
Okay, good. You have all that information. There's a whole lot of stuff going on in the next 3, 4, 5 weeks. So I'm going to run through a bunch of this stuff quick, but Jan has the info on this grave marking.
On the 20th, Saturday the 20th of this month, at the Stevens Farm Cemetery, also known as the Shaw Cemetery, which is now on private property off of Grandview Road in Alexandria, owned by a totally different family. The SAR, Sons of the American Revolution, is going to put a marker on the grave of James Shaw, Revolutionary War veteran, and there will be a ceremony, 2 o'clock. There are directions. If anyone's interested in going, I think I already sent it to our board members. If you're interested in attending, you can call us or email me and I can get the directions to you. I don't know what kind of parking situation they have there. Don't know what the weather will be, but they'll have it unless it's thundering and lightning. They'll have the grave marking. The reason they found this James Shaw, that he was buried there, is because back last year, about a year ago at this time, the Daughters of the American Revolution had a grave marking down at Flag Springs Cemetery, where we marked the grave of Edward Morin. There was a man there who was a descendant of Edward Morin, and he told us that his other ancestor, James Shaw, was buried in Alexandria, and he was going to see about getting his grave marked. Well, the cemetery was overgrown, in terrible condition, not taken care of. It's just a small family plot on private property, but the owners of the property weren't keeping up with it. So he and a couple other SAR guys really did a good job on it. And the thing is, two of James Shaw's sons married two of Edward Morin's daughters. So that's his whole connection to both of these Revolutionary War patriots. So I'm gonna be there, maybe some of our other members, and we're gonna present. Every group is offered if they want to present a wreath. So we have a wreath we're going to present at the ceremony. So if anybody wants to come, you can join us.
Okay, thanks, Jan. Like I said, there's a lot coming up. That's on the 20th of April. On the 27th of April is Northern Kentucky Restoration Weekend. That's going to be at the Newport Intermediate School. I have a schedule up here if anybody's interested. If you need to know how to do plaster, how to change, take care of your windows, what have you, they've got people coming from all over that are going to do seminars all through the day on that. And I forget how many years they've done this now, but they seem to be getting a bigger crowd each and every year because they get some good speakers in there. Well worth doing. And we will be there, yes. The following weekend is History Day that Richard talked about.
I forgot to mention on the 27th of April, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Fort Thomas.
Everybody hear that? The 27th in Fort Thomas, they're doing the Vietnam Memorial up in Tower Park.
Yes.
And I think that starts at noon.
Probably.
There's too much going on. I have information on History Day up here.
It's free.
Yeah, it's free this year. Richard mentioned the location for our annual picnic has been determined. We're going to be at the Highland Heights, behind the Highland Heights City Building. And this year we're going to have music. Okay? So hope everybody comes out for that. Anybody know Chuck Keller up in Fort Thomas? Okay, Chuck's going to be there singing his heart out for us. There is so much stuff going on. I found a couple of articles. Are there any walkers here? Anybody like to walk? She's pointing fingers at you. Daryl does. There's a long walk that South Bank Partners has been promoting for how many years now, Debbie? 10 years?
Longer than that.
Longer than that. It runs all the way from Devou or Ludlow, Devou Park, Ludlow area, and it's going all the way to Pendry Park. 20-some miles, okay? So you got lots of room for walking, biking, running, and the city of Bellevue just got $3.7 million in a grant to do theirs, and there's another $2.7 million that came out for Ludlow, Newport, and Dayton, I think, to finish sections of theirs. I'm sorry, in Silver Grove. So it's coming together. I mean, this is going to be a phenomenal walking trail. If you've ever been through the Loveland Bike Trail, they just get so many people out there in decent weather. And I think we have the possibility of having something similar to that here. And I'm sure there's plans to connect all of these trails over the years, okay? It'll take a while, but it'll come together. Is anybody else interested in Payne Hollow? Okay. I went to a meeting Monday night, and I met a man there, and he's part of a group that is establishing Payne Hollow as a tourist area. They're going to keep it just the way it is. They're not going to take anything away from it. But they want people to be able to see what that was like. Does everybody know what Payne Hollow is? You've all heard of Harlan Hubbard? Yeah. Okay. When Harlan and Anna left Brent on their shanty boat and went down to New Orleans, and then when they came back, they settled at Payne Hollow, which is down just south of Carrollton. So this guy, he said, we're not ready for the public yet. He said, we don't have bathrooms in, we don't have anything. It is a very, very steep walk to get down to where Harlan and Anna lived. And their studio and their home that they built down there. But he said, if you're interested, if you have some people that are interested, maybe sometime this summer, call me and we'll set up a time and you can bring some people down to go see it. And I think it would be wonderful. We had the meeting at the at Harlan's studio in Fort Thomas, but that was really interesting. But this was after he left. They were still shanty boat people back then. So I think it'd be really interesting to see it. There's a new book out. And we're kind of proud of this one. This is from our very own Shirlene Jensen. This is her capstone project for her master's degree. Okay? It's available at our office right now, and it will be available online very soon as Steve gets his act together and gets that. John Hoffert is a city council member for Highland Heights, but he also happens to live in a house off of Robinson Road. And this all kind of started because everybody knows Robinson Road, but nobody's ever heard of Edward Robinson before. This guy was a main player in the United States and throughout, and nobody's ever heard of him before. So I'm going to let John tell you the whole story of him, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
So how many people have ever heard of Edward Robinson? 3? I never heard of him either until I moved into his house. So back in 2011, my wife and I had just moved into the area from Roanoke, Virginia. We were there for 3 or 4 years. Before that, we lived in Chicago for 20 years. But we were both born in Campbell County, and I actually was born in Highland Heights, but moved to Cold Spring, got married, moved to Camp Springs. So we were trying to find a house, and we struggled, looked in Fort Thomas, looked in Newport, couldn't find a house. So our realtor showed this one on Regency Court off of Robinson Road. I worked downtown at the time. It was 10 minutes from work. I said, this is perfect. We got it at what I thought was a really good price. So when we closed on the house, we're at the closing, and the couple that was there with us handed us these documents and said, this is the original spec to the house that was built in around 1910. Well, that's pretty amazing. It's had 12 owners since it was built, so how they passed them on was pretty remarkable. And on the front of the house was a little circle that said Robinson Manor. And so between those two things, I said, I gotta find out what that's all about. So my wife and I started doing some research, and one thing led to another, and we said, you know what, this guy was famous. I never heard of him. People on the street in the city never heard of him. So we're gonna do a little bit of research, and one thing led to another, and eventually we got it on the National Historic Register. But let me tell you a little bit about this guy. Figure out how to get this work. So I'll go into the early years of Edward Robinson, and I'll talk about his time as a lumber baron, and talk about the Robinson Mountain Fund, Robinson Forest, which is down in eastern Kentucky, and then Home Place, which was a place that he built for 15 years, and that's where he learned the whole business of lumbering, and he met his future partner, Frederick Mowbray. Well, at this time, in the 1880s, 1890s, lumber was becoming a very important part of the industrial revolution of this country. People were building World War I. They're going to need a lot of lumber, and so it's a very important part of the history of building our country. Well, him and his partner must have had a clue about that because they worked in a lumber yard for 15 years. So they formed this partnership. I'll go into a little bit more later. But he married Lydia, his wife, in 1895, and the partnership they formed was in 1901, and they incorporated in 1908. So Lydia was from Newport, Kentucky, where she went to school through the 8th grade. Her dad fought in the Civil War. He became a policeman in Newport, and he was killed in action, the first policeman killed in action in the area. So they had, I think there's still a plaque or a memorial of him down there in Newport. So Lydia helped her mother raise her siblings. Then she moved to Cincinnati, where she met E.O., and they married in 1895. And they moved into this house in Highland Heights a few years after they were married. They probably lived in Cincinnati about 5 or 6 years, maybe a little bit longer. You know, there's a debate, there's no exact date the house was built in Highland Heights, but we're guessing around 1910, 1909. But the house and the land, which at the time was about 100 acres or more, was deeded to her by a lady named Annie Ryan, who I cannot find for the life of me any relationship to her and this person, but that's an awful lot of land for her to buy, but Robinson himself wasn't on the deed. So maybe there was financial reasons at the time for that, not sure, but eventually, you know, he obviously was the main supporter of the business and everything there. So interesting house in that it was designed by a famous architect at the time, G.C. Burroughs. He also did many buildings in Cincinnati, Brookwood Pottery, Bruin Watch Company, and several others. And we still have a copy of the original specs that he designed on onion skin paper. Now Steve has a copy, and you all can see it if you want sometime, but it's kind of delicate to hold. And we have the original architectural drawings. When they lived there, they had about 80 to 100 acres, a barn, pergola, a lake with a water pump that pumped the water up from a little pond to their house, and they had a couple of houses for their workers on the farm, because he kept it kind of like a gentleman farm. It's not it's not like a big brick stone house that you see in Newport or one of those places. It looks like an old farmhouse type of a house. So it's like a gentleman's farm. But they had a live-in houseman from Japan named George Haas, who acted as a cook and did other household duties, and Lydia's mother also lived with them there. And they also had a chauffeur by the name of Bowden. And I'll tell you a little bit of story about him later on. This is Lydia and Edward, one of the few pictures I have of them at all, and obviously black and white. And this was the house in 1918. It looks almost exactly the same as it does today, except there's not a sidewalk going up the front. There's a little driveway that goes around each side and then circles the front. But as far as the exterior and most of the interior, it looks pretty much the same. So his main purpose, and they must have really thought about this a lot in the 15 years that they were working at the lumber company, because they either leased and or bought about 15,000 acres in Breathitt, Perry, and Knott County down in Kentucky. And that's down in the Appalachian eastern part of the state. Eventually, he built mills, he built in Quicksand, Irvine, Viper, and at its peak, he had over 1,000 employees. So when you look at some of the older pictures, there's the mills, and then there's the houses that he built for them. He built schools, he built churches, and at that time, and for the 20 years that he ran the business as a partner, they were the economy of that eastern Kentucky. And their main customer was Singer sewing machine. Remember those old wooden sewing machines? They provided the lumber for those. And at first it was just for the United States, and then it became, they're selling lumber around the world. They had plants in Michigan, New York, and other places. And he built stores, and he built homes, and they had a railroad, their own railroad line to move the lumber. And so they were the lumber barons at that time in that part of the state. Now, there were others in other parts of the country. They had that forest, and it was all virgin wood. You know, imagine 15,000 of untouched ever wood, and they lumbered it for 20 years. The popular ones were oak and ash and other hardwood, but they also had branch offices in Grand Rapids, Cleveland, Buffalo, and Boston. So I don't know how, with him doing all that, I don't know how he ever spent any time at the house in Howland Heights, because all of his business was down in eastern Kentucky. So his partner, Frederick Mowbray, was from Peru, Indiana, and he moved to Cincinnati at the same lumber company where they worked for 15 years. And so they eventually bought about 300 acres to get started from a guy named Miles Back, and his relatives are still alive down in that part of Kentucky in Quicksand, which we tried to visit, but we had some issues come up. We didn't quite make it to Quicksand, but we did see Robinson Forest. And they eventually owned about 50,000 acres. They formed the Robinson Mowbray Company. They lumbered the land for 20 years to the ground. So once that happened, there was no more economy in eastern Kentucky for these thousands of people that worked for him. So whether he felt bad about it or he did it out of the goodness of his heart, but he donated that land, that 15,000 acres, to the University of Kentucky. This is one of the sawmills at Quicksand. It's gone now through the years. There's nothing left of any of his businesses. This is one of the ads they ran for selling the oak, and M&R, the Mowbray Robinson Company. And then this is a picture of both Robinson and Mowbray when they were younger and their train station. And you can see the size of that tree. And that it's hard to tell on there, but that's a big tree that they were lumbering. And here they are again in another photo together in their train. And then this is the sewing machine. We actually have one of those. We didn't buy it that year. It was her grandmother. She bought it that year. So when this was all done, the land was gone. But for that 20 years, that process of him and his partner made them a couple of the most wealthy men in America. The equivalent of a Bill Gates or a Bezos or whoever. They were equivalent of a billionaire at that time. But nobody here ever heard of it. So he created the E.O. Robinson Mountain Fund, which, here again, I think he did it because he might have felt guilty. He left no trees and no economy for these people. So he wanted to do it so that he could teach the people that used to be farmers 25 years ago how to live off the land again. So he donated the land to UK to build, they were responsible for building it back up as a forest. Now, if anybody ever has been down there, ever heard of it, Robinson Forest is the name of it. It's owned by University of Kentucky, and it is a 100-year-old forest because they did a great job retreeing that whole area down there, and it is used for educational purposes for the forestry department of UK. So we did visit that, and it's amazing to see, and you can see it down there. But there's only been a few books written about what happened, and this is one about the EO Mountain Fund that was written a few years ago, probably 20 years ago now. He gave $1 million to this fund, and it was meant to help the people of that area to live off the land. So he also deeded the 15,000 acres to UK, and he left, there were two separate things. He let the mountain fund be run by a separate board, which still exists today, 100 years later, and the 15,000 acres of land was run by UK. Well, at the time, he was trying to convince UK to teach the public how to live off the land, how to raise food, how to raise animals and all that. Well, they got into some pretty good debate about who was going to do what, and after about 5 or 6 years, he was not happy with how UK was handling the re-education of the people. So he started a place called Home Place, and that's another tract of land that he built a house on that he hired a lady to run that would teach the people. And every year they would have a big 4-H type of affair where they would have all kind of awards for the different kind of crops. But through the years, his fund has probably given out millions of dollars, both in scholarships and grants to the people of Kentucky. And here's a picture of him when he gave out some of the money. You can't really read it there. And that was in the Cincinnati Enquirer when he donated $1 million. So in 1923, the 15,000 acres was donated. He was intending to use it for educational purposes. And through the years, UK did replant the trees and have it used for research. And then, like I said, over the last 100 years, it's now a full-size forest again. And this is one of the signs. That's a picture that I actually took when we were down here. Perfect picture. But it is amazing when you see it. There's a fire tower that's probably one of the oldest in the country. It's about a 100-year-old fire tower because they do monitor it for fires. So his vision was to help the area to learn to live off the land, as he did before he lumbered it to the ground. He wanted the Eastern Kentucky residents to develop their own leaders. So he financed a school, Buckhorn School, and the Kingdom Come School, as well as Lee's Institute in Jackson, Kentucky. So this is Jackson, Kentucky, near Hazard and Quicksand is down there. So he started scholarships at first at Berea for anybody that was going to get a college scholarship. He would pay for it. And then he started at University of Kentucky. And today, I think at any college in Kentucky, you can get a Robinson scholarship. I was at NKU in the fall talking to them about Arbor Day, because I was on the tree committee for Highland Heights, and one of the students there was a Robinson scholar. So here it is 100 years later, there are Robinson scholars. Now this guy obviously didn't, I don't know that maybe he did have that vision that 100 years from the time he started, he'd still be active, but the fund is still very active. Part of the problem for Robinson Forest in the last 100 years is people have wanted to tear down the forest. They either wanted to mine it or they wanted to tear it down and sell the lumber. So there has been nothing but fights and so forth. In the 80s, the students led a protest to stop tearing it down for coal mining and other things. So there's been more pressure to the 2000s. And then finally in 2018, they figured out how to get carbon points to trade in for money. And I haven't done any research lately to see how that's going, but I'm hoping that they're not tearing any of the trees or burning them yet. So this one area that he built called Home Place is in Erie, Kentucky, and that's where he built a house and hired Lula Hale. She was a teacher in the area. It took him like 3 or 4 years to convince her to run this place. And she said, well, I don't know anything about farming, so he sent her to Denmark to learn about farming. I don't know if they were experts in farming back then, I'm not sure. But she learned about it. She came back there and worked until she retired in 1970. unfortunately, some recent floods last couple of years have destroyed the home place built. It's now gone, and I'm not sure if we're going to rebuild it, but it was still active up until that flood that came through a couple of years ago. So she was born in Sandlick, Kentucky. She taught throughout the state, and she was very caring of the children she taught. They started bookmobiles where they would have books throughout the area. She was director from 1930 to 1975. And at Berea College, there are still letters in their archives that she wrote back and forth to Mr. Robinson because, you know, it's a pretty far distance from, they didn't have phones, I guess cell phones to call each other all the time. So they kept in touch with letters. One of his statements in his will that they did, they said he wanted all his letters destroyed. So any letter that was found in his house, his wife destroyed, unfortunately. I think it's because she thought he was having an affair with him, but I don't think so. But anyway, she was recognized throughout the years with many awards for her work at Home Place. So he sent her to Switzerland to study. It was a demonstration farm. He built hospitals and dorms. At that time, again, he wanted nurses and doctors to come out of this area to help the people of that area. He wanted them to have low-cost medical and dental for the area. And he started scholarships. And so it literally went on for 45 years. And that's what it looked like until a couple years ago. It's still there, 100 years later. We actually had an appointment to go visit it. Something came up a couple years ago. So he retired in 1922, and that's when he started all this home place and all this mountain fun. They traveled around the world. He was a wealthy man. They spent 10 months in Europe. I mean, I packed for 2 weeks. I don't know how you do that. We packed for 10 months. That could be tough. But so they visited 12 countries. He was active in different organizations throughout the area, and at the time, this Highland House home was literally in Cold Spring. It hadn't been incorporated as Highland Heights yet. But he was also active at the Highland Country Club. And he was going to donate 10 acres or more, I think it was 30 acres, to them to build the back 9, because they only had a front 9. He was one of the presidents, early presidents. Well, they had a party the night before he was going to go to Louisville to transfer the deed, or Frankfurt, I'm not sure which, and he was killed in the car crash. So usually his chauffeur would drive, but he wanted him to stay back and help clean up the house and the party. So when that happened, his wife did not want to donate the land, so she offered to sell it to the Highland Country Club for $35,000, and they didn't have that kind of money. So it was another, from 1968, this is the 34th, so they actually got it back on. So that was bad timing on the golf course. This is when they were, that picture at the house, they were giving away a bride. I don't know who it is. This is them on vacation somewhere in Italy. Venice, I think it is. And this is when they were in Egypt. Yeah, they went to Hawaii, went to Florida, a lot of places. And this is when he died. It was, it was in the newspapers. So we moved in 2011. Like I said, there was a sign saying Robinson Manor, and we got the specs, and so we started research. It took me 6 years to research because I was still working full-time, and I really didn't have a lot of time. So I did it in my spare time, but the more I did it, the more interesting it was. There's a box over there with this deep in papers, but there's only been 3 books that I could find. One called The Embattled Wilderness, and one was The Good Neighbor to the Mountain Fund, and then one was a thesis a student did at the University of Iowa, and 2 of the 3 are talking about the forest, not a whole lot of history of Robinson himself. So I finally did get it on the historical register with the help of my wife and everybody that did the help with the research. This is the original architect drawing of the house, and it looks the same as far as the design as it is today. And these are pictures of the house you had to turn in for the application for the register. And this is pictures of the inside. This was their I don't know what you call it, the living room maybe? Formal living room. The stairway going up, and these were some unique features. The back stairway that was going from the cook's room to the kitchen to the basement where his bathroom was. And then there's those windows that are unique at the time. And there's the formal dining room, and underneath the dining room was a little silver thing where you would step on it, it would ring the bell, and the cook would come in and deliver the meal. And then there's that.
We don't have that anymore.
She just yells and I go get it. Still works, it works differently. But those are original pantry that is still there. There's two of them. They are different. That one's in the same place. The kitchen has been completely redone. But this was the water source across the street that, as you can see, it's made out of stone. There's a pond there. And all that was pumped up to the house for his water source. And that was there originally in 1910 as well, and that is still there. And then there's the historical register part of it. That was his pipe holder, Mr. Robinson. We don't have that. His niece sent us a picture of that. So I really wanted my wife to tell this story about the place settings, but she said, I can do it. She's in the...
He's the talker.
She has some great stories about the house that I didn't participate in. I was at work or out partying somewhere. But anyway, she's in the front yard working on the yard, and the car pulls up. These two old ladies coming up.
Old ladies.
When I say old, they were probably younger than me. I wasn't there, but I did get to meet them later. So they said, we are the great nieces of Lydia Robinson. We tour the house. And so Kim, of course, says, come on in. So she gave the tour of the house, and they said, this is where the grandfather clock was, this is where the koi pond was, this is where this picture was, and blah, blah. They just had the best time. They were sisters. One lived in Michigan, one lives in
They were
Fort Thomas.
cousins.
Cousins? Okay.
Cousins.
The National Historic Register. That's another story about the lumber firm when it was moving. Like I said, there's only been a few books, but one of the things that, a couple of different things. One is the part that, and I still didn't witness this either, but there's a couple of ghost stories about the house. But I didn't witness it, but my wife was there when it happened, and she wasn't alone. And we did a lot of work on the house from an electrical standpoint and other things. And one day, they're working on the light right in the kitchen, and the electrician says, well, your mother just went up the back steps. And my wife said, no,
I
my
said,
mother.
my mother's never free. She's not going up the back steps.
She's been dead for 20 years, so it wasn't her. And so, don't know who that was. And then another time, the electricians are working in the basement, and there was a door that was jammed open. You know, the basement was all concrete, and there was eight inches of concrete between the ceiling and the basement and the floor upstairs. So that I tried to close the door. You know, I used a crowbar, sledgehammer. You couldn't budge that door. I mean, I couldn't. So there was a Dorothy cellar door that comes into that part of the basement from the outside. And so that electrician's working down there one day, and all of a sudden that door slammed shut. Well, that electrician left, and he never came back. So, and then the only other thing that was weird, and I might be able to attest to this, but you know, I showed you his pipe case. He smoked a pipe. We didn't know that at the time, so when we met the cousins, the great nieces, my wife asked, did he by any chance smoke a pipe? He said, yeah, why? Well, I still smell it. Philanthropist, hero, or villain. He was done lumbering the area in this part. There were a lot of people who were upset about how he left the land. I mean, it was empty, and there was no irrigation properly and drainage, so all that just running all over the place, the water and the rain and everything. So people were not happy about that. They said, well, he sold this land just to make money, and we're left with all this mess. So there's been a lot of articles at the time, kind of saying, hey, you weren't such a great guy. And whether or not that made him, decide to become, the donor of all this money and land and so forth, I'm not sure. But when I think of 100 years of money still flowing from the grants and the scholarships, I think he still might be more of a philanthropist hero than a villain for tearing up the land. You think about the forest today with Warehouse or whoever manages the forest, they didn't know how to do that right back then. They didn't know how to rebuild it. They just cut them down and away you went. So I don't think he was any worse than anybody else at the time. They just didn't have that technology. So the other thing that is still going on, like I talked about through the years, and this is something that, I did write a little book. I didn't get it published yet, but it was about saving the forest. Because in that forest, there are certain animals, that's the only place in the country that they live. There's a little wood rat down there, and so the book I was writing was about the wood rats and how people have to be careful about saving forests in this country, especially one that's 100 years old like Robinson Forest. It's still the biggest one in the area that's that type of a forest. So it is important, and that also incented me to start Highland Heights to become a tree city 6 years ago. So April 27th is our Arbor Day. If you live in Highland Heights, come up and give free tree. So, any questions that I missed or didn't cover? Yes.
Was his partner involved in any of this philanthropy? Or?
So here's what happened, and this is sad. The business was breaking up around 1922, 1923. He came down with a disease, and he moved to Arizona, and he died in 1925.
Oh, really?
So he didn't really get a chance to participate. Whether he would have or not, I'm not sure, but he went pretty quick once he was diagnosed. Yeah. And I've tried to find information on him, and he lived in Cincinnati in the Hyde Park area, and the building's gone, tore down, so I couldn't find it. But yeah, they were quite the lumber barons, and they were both very wealthy when they walked away. So, yes, sir.
But Cindy, they didn't have children.
Robinsons did not have any kids at all.
Did she die did she live there till her death?
So yeah, I meant to say that, good catch. 1951, she was still alive, and she passed that year. He died in 34. We believe she spent most of those 17 years in an apartment complex or a building in Cincinnati.
It was a hotel in Cincinnati. Her sister got like the penthouse and moved in there, and they just paid the workers.
They kept the farm going.
Keep the house up. They did not sell the house.
And so another interesting story, the chauffeur's name was Bowden. So, and I think they had a house right next to it that was run by them. So when we had the dedication, the two sisters came. We invited anybody that ever lived in the house. So we want to hear stories. And one of them was Eimer, Doc Eimer. One was Macaulay. One was, who was it? That was, they weren't on there. I couldn't get a hold of them, but they were. But the people that bought it from her in 1951, the guy's name was Lynn. He was a doctor. He was also a race boat driver. The barn that got torn down in '76 when the house was sold was full of his race boats. He was quite a racer and a doctor. But his daughter, at the time, was relatively young. She came up from Florida for the dedication of the house, and she was surprised they didn't tear this down. So, but she remembered it. She was telling some stories.
She was surprised they hadn't torn the house
Yeah,
down. They were in their 90s, her and her husband, and he said, I used to play in the basement. They were so cute.
Yeah, so there's a couple other, well anyway, the Bowdens, she lives in Florida, the granddaughter, I think it is, Pam. I might have that wrong. Yeah. Yes, Pam, you knew her. So she calls me up, because she came to the dedication. She calls me up and says, we've got some furniture that I think was in this house, or on the porch. I said, 1951, I don't know, that's hard to believe. I said, well, she asked if I want it. I said, well, sure, but how am I going to get there? You live in Florida, and I don't have a car that big. But it turned out my cousin has a furniture business in Florida, and he does business on both coasts, so he said he would get it, bring it up, go to a Reds game. 6 years later, he brought it up. So, but it is on the porch, and he said it could be 67
Oh,
years
it
old.
is beautiful, thick wicker.
Yeah,
I
just
mean, it
really,
is.
really made it. But he, you know, if you go to eastern Kentucky, everybody there has heard of Robinson. But if you come up here, he lived here, but he was a very humble man. When he was alive, like I said, he was Highland Country Club, a few other things. He was involved in political fundraisers and things like that. But, you know, he just wasn't well known here at all. So, any other questions? Yes.
Hey, John.
Anna Ryan, husband, and John Buckley were business partners.
Okay.
And when her husband died, John assumed he was getting all the property. Well, Anna took him to court and sued so that she could prove that she was the legal heir to her husband's part of the property. There's a lot of newspaper stories about her doing this, and then for a woman to do that at that time was unheard of, which is why it made the paper, because she not only went to court as a woman, she won and got that house.
Yeah, and think about that. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So think about this. I still don't know why or how she sold it to Lydia, or maybe she sold it to Mr. Robinson, and he didn't want his name on the deed for, you know, some other reason, because he's got another business, you know. So I don't know. But yeah, that's a great add-on.
Yep.
Yes, sir. Mr.
I've
Johnson.
researched that story. I'm familiar with it.
Thank you.
That pump house down by the lake, is that the original pump house of yours, Robert?
Yes, it is. And
I was wondering that.
I don't know how it got disconnected from the property, because it's not ours.
Yeah.
It belongs
to Derek.
to the guy that lives on Hope Lane, Brad.
There was another one too, there was another little stone.
Yeah, there were a couple,
Like behind where your house is. Behind the court. There's another one back there in the woods.
well, there was one right behind the house.
Behind Bowden's house.
Yeah, and there was one right behind the house here, because there's a tunnel. Somebody told us there's a tunnel under the house that went to it. So, don't know, but yeah, they were, whether they were for, you know, storing meat, not sure, but yeah. You play? But I have a friend that played pool in the house too, because they dining room at the time when Imer owned it, was a pool table instead of a dining room table, so they played pool there. So we got the pool table upstairs, not there. So, anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
I think you said this, but what year was the house built?
I can't tell exactly, but I'm speculating about 1909, 1910. The deed that she's talking about was transferred in 1909. We did find that. We have a copy of it. We got a stack of papers this big. We'll give them to Steve that he can research more. And you know, like I said, I did this for a while, but there is so much more. But most of it is, these books are about saving the forest, and I think that's still a risk. You know, it really is, because UK, you know, they need the money, they're going to sell it. It'll be sold as lumber or mining or whatever. Somebody else had a hand? Yes?
Was that the only place where he got lumber from?
Where he got what?
Was that the only place where he got the lumber?
Yes, yeah, it was the 3 counties right there. It's right in the middle, Breathitt, Perry, and Knox County, and that was about 50,000 acres at one time, and that was it, yeah. Yeah, big virgin forest at the time. All right, well, thank you very much.
And that is all I have. Does anybody else have anything for this evening? I missed anybody? No? Well, I thank you very, very much for coming tonight, and be safe going home. All right?